Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to kick this thing off. I'd like to welcome you to the February edition of the West Coast Chamber's Advocacy in Action Breakfast. I'm glad that you could join us, and I'd like to say a big shout out and a welcome to our friends joining us digitally this morning as well. Thanks again to the City of Holland for making that happen. Before we kick off, I just want to say a big thank you to the sponsors that helped make this event happen. We've got a great number of companies that have been supporting the Chamber for quite a long time, and our gold level sponsor this morning is Great Lakes Commercial Finance, and our silver level sponsors are Blue Cross Blue Shield and Blue Care Network of Michigan, Cunningham Dalton, First National Bank of Michigan, Hayward, Holland Board of Public Works, and Transmatic. So big thank you to all those companies who have been huge ongoing sponsors of the Chamber. We have a jam-packed agenda this morning, and so we're going to start off with an update from Congressman Bill Huizenga. Last time we were all together in this room was with Congressman Huizenga at the annual breakfast with Bill, and now we know a lot more than we did then, and he's going to give us an update on everything that's going on in Washington. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, the Washington part might be the easiest part. I don't know. Let's start there. In fact, I was going to notice that. I was thinking that this was the first time that the Chamber was back in since that breakfast with Bill. Washington, D.C., quote-unquote crisis averted, which really just amounts to kicking the can down the road again. We have another continuing resolution that is going on. There is no actual agreement as to what spending is going to be. It causes real issues. Here's an example. A manufacturer tied to the DOD. I can't get into the specifics, but up in Muskegon is telling us that if this continuing resolution was continued and they have no projection, the military is telling them that the product that they supply is going to be put on hold, and that means layoffs, right? And whether you are in healthcare, whether you're in DOD, whether you are in transportation, whatever it is, this stumbling through it that government has become, this has just been a commonplace, accepted way that we go through funding government year to year is just, it's got to stop. And this is very frustrating. What's most interesting is this is under unified government. Now, don't get me wrong, Republicans, when we had 2 years of unified government, 2017, 2018, we had our own internal struggles. But again, we have one party in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they still can't get agreement with what those spending priorities are. So that's kind of the challenge that we have. On a more maybe personal note, a couple of the things that I've been working on. One, you may have seen in the news back maybe a month or so ago that the IRS was going to require facial ID to be able to use their website to get information. Had anybody else seen this? Okay. So that raised some real alarm bells for me, and so I put in a bill in very short order that would ban the IRS from using facial recognition as a requirement to be able to access your own information. The IRS told us that, and told everybody that they were backing down. Now this was an interesting set of circumstances where you were seeing the conservatives and the progressives finally coming together because Jaya Pramila, who is the chair of the Progressives, and a number of others on the left, joined me and a couple of others on the right to say, hey, wait a minute, we're not sure that this is a great idea for government to have this kind of information. It's expanded from that. Ron Wyden, who is a senator from Oregon, who he and I would probably have a difficult time agreeing today is Monday. Apparently everybody's asleep yet on this. We got Dennis on. Okay, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that. All right, but he and Rick Scott and Ted Cruz have reached out. In fact, Rick Scott and I are introducing the companion bills. I've got the House version. He's got the Senate version, which says the IRS not only can't use facial recognition, it can't use any biometrics. What does that mean? Can't do an iris scan, can't do thumbprints, can't do DNA. And some people have gone, oh, nobody's asking for a spit test. My answer to that is yet. And we ought to make sure that we lay that marker down very, very soon, and we're doing that. So we think there's going to be a lot of bipartisan support on that, and hope that that is going to be the case moving forward. We're continuing to work on issues like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, as well as a number of the other things that affect West Michigan, whether it's manufacturing, agriculture, obviously tourism. Inflation has hit everyone, right? It just simply has. We're at 7.5% annual. If you look at what happened in January, we're at 5+ real terms over the last year. And this is significant. It's not transient, meaning it's not temporary. That's what had been the line from the Federal Reserve on down. Jerome Powell finally admitted that. He has dropped that word transient. The simple, sad fact is we're so far behind in where the Fed, in my opinion, should have been, and many other economists would agree with that. Not that I'm an economist. Yeah, don't. The worst only thing I can be is a judge, but no, not a judge. Sorry. Sorry. We got a couple of judges. Nobody's awake here. Jonathan Alsberg's here. We got Paul Krause. We got a number of people. Sorry. Apparently only I think I'm funny. So that's yeah, stand up. It's a tough crowd. It's a tough crowd. All that to say is we know that there's real effects on business today, whether it's with material, whether it's with transportation, whether it's even human capital coming in, and it has to be addressed. And the sad fact is, if the Fed doesn't stop this tapering, meaning that we are buying $130 billion per month internally, right? The Federal Reserve purchases from the Treasury $130 billion a year to keep interest rates artificially low. And what you're going to see the Fed have to do is potentially even do like a 0.5 point tick up in interest rates. They're talking about 2 of those this year. Had they started this 2 years ago or more, it would have been much more gradual. And sadly, it looks like we're going to have to shock the patient with this economy going on. So there's a lot of layers to that. I won't go into it anymore, but I'm happy to take. We got time for a quick question or two. We'll see if anybody woke up in between. Yeah.
Question about this is just a personal or more so DACA students. I know it's in between, giving them some, right now they're out in limbo. So just what is your stance on or that, or how can you help the DACA children or adults now that were brought here as children? How can we help them? They're in limbo right now. So.
Yeah, there's been a lot of limbo, frankly, over these issues of immigration. Right? The closest that we came was a few years ago when Bob Goodlatte, who was the chair of the Judiciary Committee, we had something that was not very original, but it was called the Goodlatte 1 and the Goodlatte 2. Those were 2 options that would have attempted to address, both the DACA promise, the kids that literally came across with no choice of their own right. They're 3 years old, they're going wherever mom and dad are. And distinguishing those from the folks who have made a very conscious decision to either overstay visas or not even attempt to have visas in the meantime. And I was just listening to radio on the way in, and one of my former colleagues, Carlos Curbelo, who's from Florida, was talking about this exact issue. We have a real crisis on the border. I mean, it is significant. In fact, I'm scheduled to go down there in, I think it's beginning of March. Todd and I actually are both going down. We were supposed to go down at the beginning of January and literally spent the day at Grand Rapids Airport, if you remember that January 3, 4, 5 snowstorm that came in. We couldn't get out to get down there, but we know that there's real issues there. And we also know that there's real issues about these kids that are here and in that limbo. And there's been probably some of the attempts have been to solve it all. all at the same time. And I understand that sentiment. It's just very, very difficult to be able to do that all in one big fell swoop. You, however, do need to have some types of agreement about these various parts of the immigration issue. And so far, honestly, the biggest issue is there's just no consensus. That is what's holding it up. And typically, Washington, D.C. Waits until there's overwhelming consensus, and then things will tumble very, very quickly. Unless there is an attempt, as there has been a couple of attempts, to do things unilaterally, meaning only the Democrats or only the Republicans, and that's what happened with Goodlatte 1 and 2. We thought we had a consensus. There was at one of them, I forget which of the two it was, but one of them, 197 Republicans voted for it, and we were told that there was Democrat support, but they were held back. And once again, we're seeing this issue become more of a political football than it is a problem to solve, and that's very, very unfortunate. So, but very, very aware of it, discussions about it, just no consensus on how to move forward with it yet. How about one last quick question? Michael?
When we were together in December, you were working on a long-term plan to,
When we were together in December, you were working on a long-term plan to tackle the debt ceiling. Is that when that topic, you made any progress on that since we were together last?
Great, thank you for that. Not as much as we would like. Frankly, what happened is, and I think what we talked about at the Breakfast with Bill was our 30 by 30 group, which was 30 Democrats, 30 Republicans working very specifically on debt and the deficit. Measure twice, cut once. Okay. We are working at trying to figure out what the path forward is. At the end of the day, the idea was that we were going to have a group of us that were going to try to stick together to really try to push, even if it was small change, some form of structural change. And that could be in reporting, it could be in doing some studies about making sure everybody was on the same page. And because I'm not in the majority, I had to sit back and knew that I was agreeing to having to maybe take some really bad votes, because some of this stuff would maybe be attached to some things I really didn't want to have happen. My Democrat colleagues were having to work on trying to figure out how they get their leadership to insert some of these things that they didn't want to have put into these bills that they did want to have. And at the end of the day, that didn't happen. And the idea then next was, if we didn't, as a group, this 30 by 30 group, didn't get some of those reforms, then we were going to refuse to vote for these packages. That didn't happen except for one guy, Jared Golden. And he, out of our group, he was the only one that stuck to it. You know, and obviously once they didn't insert that language in, there was no expectation that the Republicans were going to have to vote for it. And I get it. This is the challenges of being in the majority. There is a burden to leadership and a burden to being actually in government, and that is one of those. And unfortunately, it didn't culminate. So honestly, we're trying to figure that whether this group is even able to move forward. I'm not giving up on a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I don't think we can. I'm trying to no pun intended, reconstitute that group as well. It is fully expected the Republicans are going to be coming back into the majority. It seems on some of these financial issues like that, the Democrats have a little easier time going, well, we're in the minority anyway, and so I need to kind of punch up my spending hawk sort of profile. And it seems like that's a little easier for them to join rather than the Republicans going in that direction of holding your own party to account. It's tough. I've been there. I've been in those meetings, and some of those toughest meetings that you have are with the folks in your own party going, okay, we can't continue to just be loosey here pulling the football out from Charlie Brown. We have to deal with this issue, and that's a very significant one. So. Anyway, so that's a quick little update. We'll be sticking around, and glad you didn't ask about redistricting, but at this point, there's really no significant changes. There are some lawsuits that are underway, mostly surrounding Detroit with the Voters' Rights Act and the concept of one man, one vote that had been enshrined since the 1960s. Right now, none of the Michigan districts are actually the same size. So there's going to have to be, we believe, probably going to have to be some adjustment, but it's going to be in all likelihood very minor. So at this point, it looks like it's going to be for the 4th district, southern half of Ottawa County, Allegheny and Buren, northern third of Marion County, Kalamazoo, except for the bottom tier of townships, of Kalamazoo County, and then Battle Creek and the 4 surrounding townships there. So that's what's going to be the 4th. The 3rd is the northern half, Fillmore Street north of Ottawa County. Then Muskegon Heights, Norton Shores, a couple of those communities in Muskegon, and then the city of Grand Rapids and the surrounding suburbs that are currently actually in this 2nd district. So it's going to be an interesting year. So buckle up, hang on. So thanks everybody, good to be with you.
Congressman, we appreciate you giving us time this morning. Thank you very much for those remarks. So now we're going to shift gears just as a refresher for everybody, because it's been a few months since we were together. This season, we've combined our public policy and our government affairs into one, and so this is our advocacy in action. We're going to take a little bit more of a local focus right now. I'd like to invite Paul Sachs up here. Paul is the director of the Department of Strategic Impact for Ottawa County, and he's going to give us an update on what the ARPA dollars are going to do for us here in Ottawa County in the coming weeks, months, and years. Paul.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good morning, everyone. This is a pleasure for me to start my Monday and my week off this way, so thank you very much. And thank you to Jane and staff, too, for inviting me to talk with you about the federal recovery dollars. So, let's see if this thing will work, advance appropriately. Yes. So, as most of you probably know in this room, Ottawa County was provided $56.68 million in federal recovery funds. Those funds are part of the larger American Rescue Plan Act that was passed last year, March of 21. And that total bill was $1.9 trillion. And within the ARPA package was $350 billion for states and local and tribal governments to respond and recover from the impacts of the pandemic. County distribution, part of that package is the state and local fiscal recovery fund, and our $56.7 million was distributed to counties. Basically, the variable was part of a per capita basis. So in the state of Michigan was 83 counties. It ranged from about 400,000 for a county all the way up to about $340 million. And Ottawa County's $56 million got half of it, split for all counties distribution in 2 parts. The first half was distributed in May of last year, and we will be getting the second half in May of this year. Some of the key components to these funds are that we need to identify how we're going to spend the funds by the end of 2024. And then we have until the end of 2026 to spend $3. And it was surprising, it's somewhat being honest here, surprising to us that there are some communities across the state that they had their projects known, and they identified how they're going to spend the funds right away. And we started that process even before the final rules came out, just in January. So for us, we've been taking much due diligence and care, thinking about the most appropriate way to spend these funds. And in the final rules by the Treasury, kind of summarizing what the key focus areas are to spend the dollars, they're to maintain vital public services and replenish local revenue loss. It's also to invest in water and wastewater and broadband infrastructure, and more importantly, to help individuals, households, and businesses recover from the impacts of the pandemic. Also, another important component to these dollars is to ensure and apply a lens of equity in terms of distribution. As we think about and identify projects, what are those with the most need and the most impact across the county? And as a county, we've been very successful, remarkably successful through our partnerships, public, private, nonprofit sector. And it's one of the joys that I have in working in county government, especially in this area, is we collaborate so well to identify needs. And we have been successful in identifying inequities and working to advance prosperity and health for everyone across the county. These dollars offer an incredible opportunity for us for some very significant transformational impacts in our communities and for residents and businesses meeting a need. So we have been, that's part of the reason that we've taken our time, taken our care, and thought really strategically how we want to best utilize these dollars. You think of the end of 2024, it seems like, oh yeah, that's a ways out, but we know how fast a couple of years can move. So we're working really diligently to identify this work. And it started with the Board of Commissioners last, early summer. They identified a steering committee for these funds. And it's a tremendous group of community leaders from local government, nonprofit, foundations, chambers, economic development, and higher education. Such an incredible group that pulled together the passion and a pulse on needs across the entirety of our county. And one of the first things that they worked on was to identify these lenses for evaluating what are our high priority areas across the county that we can use these unparalleled funds for. And one of the first items that came up, obviously, and there's 6 criteria, these lenses meet the basic eligibility criteria in the final rule. And also that the projects need to address a known and demonstrated need. It also to look at projects that eliminate those disparities and those gaps and addressing the service and needs of underrepresented and marginalized communities. Very important to advance what we need to do. The project, also another consideration, is without these funds, these ideas would not otherwise materialize. We're looking for transformation, long-term transformation. Again, once in a lifetime opportunity to make some real moves for our community. And part of it is, one of these criteria is that long-term sustainability. How can these projects, what they may be, we don't know. Like we have some ideas, of course. What are these projects going to look like? And we evaluate them, whether or not to fund them. Will they be sustained for long-term impact? And can we quantify those results? That evaluative component is also very important. I'm not just going to distribute dollars and say, okay, there you go. See, good luck to you. It is provide dollars, support, do the evaluation to a degree where we can really see the outcome-based impacts. We want to be able to demonstrate as a county that the funds that we received did have that impact that we really need. Transformation is the buzzword that our committee talks about. Our priorities, we put these into buckets, and working with the steering committee was a real joy for me. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the passion of the group was outstanding. And this is where their expertise and their understanding of community needs, it radiated in that group. And they started to filter in between the large-scale meetings we had with this group of about 20 individuals. Subgroups started to materialize from the human social service needs component and housing needs and the economic development agencies and Lakeshore Advantage would be getting together and talking with their constituents and others about what those needs are. And so we compartmentalize what our priorities are with these recovery funds. One bucket that we'll call buckets, right, affectionately, was broadband. We've known for a long time that the traditional business model of this infrastructure deployment just creates inequities. And that was so obviously highlighted during the pandemic with the stay-home order. It's going to take, there's so many variables that affect this model of broadband deployment, but it requires change. And it requires what we're driving for. I could do a whole presentation on what we're thinking about for broadband. I can maybe do that at some point. But it's going to require thinking. Public-private partnership, more than likely, it's a business model for the private sector. But this is a utility that's essential. We've got to figure out how to make that happen. I believe we're on the right path. The other priority, affordable housing. We all know these challenges of affordable housing. The cost of a home right now is about $360,000. That's so limiting for so many people to afford that. Yes, the cost of a home, materials, all that is a lot. Right? This is the same type of mechanism that's going to require some creative, innovative collaboration to address those challenges. Social human service is the other bucket. And as that group of community leaders started to talk about these community and individual needs, two items elevated to the surface. Child care. Child care is so important when you look at that 0 to 5 age, and having quality care is so important for developmental growth. And also child care is one of the number one burdens on a household. Families, individuals, young children, child care can be their number one financial burden. That is an area that is a really important need to address. The other item in this bucket of social human needs, mental health support services. Now that certainly rose as a greater challenge and a community need that's talked about more and should be talked about more. We're so fortunate as a county, we were the first county in the state to pass a village for dedicated community mental health services. Well, realize throughout this, and students, and young professionals, and others, there's more support that's needed in this space, and more choices and more pathways to receive services. That is the other bucket. Fourth bucket, business stabilization. Our business needs are great to continue to thrive, to make it through this pandemic and recover and move forward. Broadband takes care of that, right? It's a part of it, right? Broadband access is huge when you think about workforce. The number one challenges for a business community is workforce. Broadband is part of that. Affordable housing is a part of this. But there's also workforce development needs. There's automation needs. And there's other capital needs for businesses. So that is the other important bucket to look at. And then the last bucket, county initiatives, to ensure that we continue to deliver the effective and needed public services on a large scale across the county. I would say that of this $56 million, we haven't really defined. I get this question all the time. Well, how much money is in each bucket? We're not putting boundaries on the bucket amount. As a committee, we're talking about, to help guide what our needs are, We have put some dollars into these buckets, but we're not rigid. We don't know what these real projects may be coming into each bucket. We've got to have some flexibility. And even when I think about broadband, yes, we're setting aside some money for broadband, but there's other dollars that's becoming available for infrastructure investment, Infrastructure Investment, Jobs Act, and other funding coming through the state. So we're balancing those elements out. But ultimately, the county board is committed to using all $56.7 million towards addressing community needs. What we also realize through this process, one of the strategic components to our plan and our process is to continue to engage as close as possible with those that need support. As a county, we don't necessarily have close tie relationships with, for example, the business community. Right? Chambers and Lakeshore Advantage connected with the business community. When I think about affordable housing, we're not as connected with other nonprofit agencies doing in the affordable housing space. So we need, I'm affectionately referring to them as bucket managers, right? They are conduits into the community that will partner with the county to identify, solicit projects, evaluate them as our bucket managers, and then bring these recommended projects to the committee for evaluation, and then ultimately for final approval to the Board of Commissioners, going through the lens of criteria, meeting our bucket priorities, and then the funds would be distributed to projects, and we would engage in that evaluative component of impact. What we did fairly recently, and where we're at right now, is we created and released a request for proposals to secure these managers for buckets. And of the 5 buckets, we're just looking for bucket managers for 3. So county initiatives and broadband we're wrestling with as a county and with other partners, but it's affordable housing, business stabilization, and human social needs. We need managers, conduits in that space. Those proposals were due last Monday on Valentine's Day. We are in the process now of evaluating the proposals that were submitted. We intend to have some interviews with those interested entities within the next few weeks. And it is my hope that by early summer, late spring, that we can be into the community as a county and with our partners, identifying projects, creating awareness of these funds, of how we're looking to spend them, and what we're looking to see happen because of these dollars. It's an honor for me to be a part of that group of individuals and everyone else working in the community to see what we can do. Again, it's so important for us to be very thoughtful about what those needs are. These are incredible dollars to have, and I'm very confident that we can make the right impacts to meet needs and transform how we support our community for vibrancy in the future. Thank you very much for listening.
Paul, thank you very much. Does anybody have a question for Paul before we get this up?
Yeah, just thinking about your timeline, when might you say we'd like to start projects? If you have to be finished by 26, what does that timeline look like for starting projects?
Yeah, if projects materialize that meet those needs, we could, for instance, it could move fairly quick. Maybe we hire bucket managers formally in March. They start to release in April and pulling projects in. Maybe this is hypothetical. Could go this fast. By July, we have some projects. Maybe there's some affordable housing projects that are shovel ready that need some additional financing to help with the mechanics of the deal. We could be ready launching projects by summer or fall. Other ones may take a little longer, of course, but we activate this as soon as we're able.
Anybody else? Yes?
Paul, you had mentioned that ARPA funding was focused, one of the priorities was wastewater and sewer. I didn't see that on the community priorities. Where does that fall within the community priorities?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. That was another area of priorities that we started to wrestle with. And even looking at through all the lenses of opportunity, evaluation, what's transformative? What are the areas of greatest need? Yes, there are needs for wastewater expansion, for industry, and wastewater extensions. When we think about some of our groundwater challenges that we have as a county, definitely a high priority. But there are other avenues of funding that we are also assessing. And we know, for example, there are some wastewater projects that have been brought forward to us that we're talking through. It's very expensive, right? The large chunks of money. We would take 25%, 50% of our 56 million towards a project in a single area. When we think about all the criteria and needs and greatest needs and impact and what households and individuals need, that can elevate it above wastewater for these dollars. But we're committed to addressing those infrastructure needs through other avenues of funding. Yep.
Big thank you to Paul. Appreciate you being here.
At this time, I'd like to invite our state legislators up to the front. We're fortunate to have State Senator Roger Vickery with us and State Representatives Luke Meerman and Jim Lilly. And as they make their way up to the front, Paul, I just want to congratulate you. I think that process that you're taking the county through is one that we can all be very proud of. It's pretty impressive. So thank you for your hard work on that.
So we've got 15 minutes with our state legislators this morning, and I just want to give them a moment to kick off this moment in your remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. And so, Senator Vickery, would you mind giving us an update on what you've been up to since we were together last?
A lot, I'll put it that way. So I can take about 15 minutes on that, but I want to make a comment to consider my other colleagues here. So appropriations time, there's a lot of money on the balance sheet for the state of Michigan. And when there's those dollars available, it makes our job all the more difficult appropriating, because it's always, when there's not the funds there, it's easy to say no. Now our task is how do we leverage these dollars? These are one-time dollars, to use that term, transformational change, generational change, and how are we effective, make it effective on that. So one area is I'm excited this week, because I will be launching off an initiative. I've been working with a number of colleagues. And the genesis of this came a little bit when we were able to, within 14 days, address a critical need for our auto industry mobility and come up with over $1 billion. And when we did that, I was analyzing and I said, fine, here we go again. We always seem to be addressing that auto industry. But what other areas of the state have we neglected for the last 3 decades? And there was a common theme: our rural communities, our food security areas, lessons learned from COVID. So I'll be introducing a comprehensive package, rural economic development and food security, that will address these issues. It's just a little bit under our mobility package, or auto package. That was $1.4 billion. This is going to be a tad bit under there, but also addresses things right here in Ottawa County. We are here, been here. Our infrastructure. We could expand numerous different industries. I could name these industries right off the top here, which I won't impose upon. But they're looking to expand to a tune of 10 million, 50 million, over 100 million. But one issue is water processing, sewer availability, capacity. A lot of these industries are located in smaller communities, and they have a population of 3,000, and yet that community can't burden this cost of a $15 million water treatment expansion. Throughout the state, to the northern part, I had an opportunity to have some young farmers from Michigan Farm Rural visit the Farm Daily Leadership Conference. And the opportunities throughout the state is huge. We learned from protein processing. We need availability of having, we can grow it right here, but how do we process it? It's been consolidated in the hands of few, and how do we bring that to our local level? How about our urban communities, where we've seen empty store shelves, we talk about food deserts in that area, but I mean, it was literally why was that occurring? Our logistics systems, our distribution systems. We had Myers that would like to put an additional distribution center in the state of Michigan, but our arcade tax policy, it looks like it's going to be pushed to Ohio. That can't be allowed to occur. If it goes in Ohio, that spans the transportation links for our Michigan producers. So that's our area. And then research. My goodness, we have neglected to put any dollars on research for our agricultural community, our rural area, and our sustainability. I lived across, had an opportunity to drive through Michigan State University with a gentleman from the area, 80-some years old, very conservative, and he described it, well, if I was going to go to Michigan State University in the dairy program, the greenhouse industry, with these facilities, I could get a degree in history, but not in research. That's how bad these facilities are. So here's an opportunity to, with bipartisan approach, address a need that has been neglected for 3 decades across the state of Michigan, and not just go down that same road we've done and basically flip the script on that. And so that's my mission. I know there's a big group coming into Lansing on Tuesday. We're going to get the bill number I got to have it by 1 o'clock, get them co-sponsorship on. I know Representative Muirman, you've been working on part of it, but instead of an ad hoc component, it's comprehensive, and Chair Thomas and Shirky had smiles on the face, like, not making here, I mean, of course, you're asking for a lot here, but they love the concept, transformational, comprehensive, let's make it happen, and let's bring it to our rural communities.
Thanks, Raj. I'll dovetail off of what you said just a little bit here. I think at a little bit higher level, as we think about all resources that we have here at the local county level to deploy as a result of ARPA funding, we also have significant dollars at the state level as well. And sort of the general, thinking I think that we've had from an Ottawa County delegation perspective is we want to make sure that we're deploying as much of those dollars into long-term infrastructure projects as possible. There's so much incentive to do sort of short-term programs at the state level. There's always a lot of sort of clamor to do that, but at the end of the day, we have to be good stewards of these dollars, and we want to make sure that because we're incurring significant debt at the federal level to fund this, that there's significant benefit over a long period of time to sort of match up with that. And so I think whether you're looking at the federal level in our partners in the congressional delegation, or the state level with us, or the county level, I think we all have a very similar thought process of how those dollars need to get deployed. We've also been very thoughtful about how do we provide some incentives to businesses to recover out of the pandemic. And one of the things that we've done at the state level in the legislature over the last sort of couple weeks, we did pass some tax relief, basically doubling the personal property tax exemption for small businesses. And so we've taken that from, I think, about $8 grand to $180 grand. So some of that work that we did back in 2012, 2015 to improve that situation, then we've built off of that now. Specifically in my committee, my Rules and Competitiveness Committee that I chair, we're working on a number of things right now, but one of the things that we're working on is a small fix to some of the insurance situation that we have for autos in our state. When we went through some of the reform over the last few years, we sort of left out the party buses and created a situation where their party buses and limousines are not on par with taxi cabs and Uber and Lyft and things like that. So there's a gap that basically is making their insurance incredibly expensive. We heard from people that would come testify in front of our committee that their insurance rates were going from about $2,500 a year, $3,000 a year, all the way up to like $30,000 a year. And that's gotten to be obviously unsustainable. And so what's going to happen is essentially that limousine party bus stuff is going to just go away because the businesses won't be able to afford that. So that's something that we're working on in that committee, and expect to hear some more in the next couple of weeks. But also working on some legislation related to sort of caregiver folks in the cannabis space in Michigan, making sure that all patients have access to safe, tested, and tracked cannabis. We want to make sure that people aren't circumventing the system now that we have both a recreational and medical market in Michigan. I do want to make sure we've got some time for questions, so I'll kick it over to Lee.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just focus my comments on school safety. Speaker Wentworth put together a school safety task force just after Thanksgiving last year. We've had dozens of meetings since then. And this is a response to Oxford. As you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of passion around this issue and just perspectives on how things need, what we need to do to make things safer. So we'll get some important things accomplished. I'm excited about that. We've got 4 Democrats and 8 Republicans, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, bipartisan committee. I just want to reach out to you to say, if you have ideas along school mental health in particular, please reach out to me. I do think that's one of the bigger areas that we're going to kind of jump into and try to have effect in. As you can think of school hardening, and you've seen that at the school level, double doors, walking in, talking to the secretary first. You know, those kind of things have been done, and more of that will be done. But I think the piece that's been left out to some extent is how do we help those kids before something happens? How do we get to them before? And as you can imagine, things are just escalating as far as the need for school mental health. So I just want to throw that out there. What we're looking for is effective boots on the ground, what is working for these kids in particular. So please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Got about 5 minutes left.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have a question? Otherwise, I've got lots of them. So anybody got any question to ask? Yes?
What about timing for some of those funding state appropriation conversations that are happening? Where are you in the process?
So just to recap the question, what is the timing of some of the state appropriation conversations you're having? When are we going to start seeing more information coming out about how you want to allocate the dollars we have, right?
Well, the first step is the governor has introduced her budget, and the budget process, the appropriation process has begun. So that's where some of the first wave of these dollars. As I indicated too, there's other supplemental expenditures, such as one I'll be introducing this week, and that moves along. So you have there's supplementals and the ongoing budget. And then some of these items that may be included in supplementals have been included in the governor's budget component, and how we navigate through there. So those who are serving on appropriations are going to be busy. I'm one of those. I have the general government budget and also the NDAR budget, and also serve on the transportation subcommittee and DNR Eagle. So the discussions are continuing, going on in person and Zoom, and my schedule's pretty filled up here. So stay tuned, and we're moving forward.
I have, it's not a question, it's a concern. I have a very eclectic life, and I deal with a lot of different people. And I have a story of a woman who I'm aware of that lived in a house that was condemned. She lived in a feces, terrible situation, tried to get adult protective services involved. The county sheriff and I
Thank you for your kids to do.
Thanks, Tom. I'm not gonna answer your question very well, other than to say, you know, my wife and I did foster care, and I have been in that mental health role myself. It's something I should check into. I don't really understand the adult side of things well, or what, you know, the repercussions are. I know, you know, generally we can't force medications on somebody, and that's often kind of what triggers the downward spiral if that adult decides not to. So I don't have a real good answer to that, but I do think there's a lot of room to work there. It's just not getting smaller. And, you know, on the childhood side of mental health, what we've seen is the demand is far outstripping anything that we're providing right now.
Tom, I appreciate you bringing this forward. Your stories there are similar throughout the state, and this is something that some of these stories are a result, well, stories indicate when COVID occurred, we did not have those interactions, when adult services weren't getting out in a timely fashion in those areas. Maybe it been through restrictions in those areas, but there's a lot of work to be done. So much work to be done, because now it's time that conveyor belt got moving, and yet the attendees were not there. I just know firsthand, not quite similar on that area, but with guardianships and conservatorships. I had a special hearing as chair of judiciary and public safety. We were in Oakland County. Thank goodness here on the west side of the state, we don't have issues with the guardianship and conservatorships, but the neglect, the abuse, the system is, in some of the areas, it's not surprising, because the funding for the guardianship aspect, it's like, I can see why this has occurred. And so I know the Attorney General's been working on this issue. She has an approach that's a little bit different than mine, and some of the, my committee members are very passionate about it, because they have family members. So there's a general theme is out there, and this is going to be coming more and more to the forefront of our adults that are being failed on all aspects through the conservatorship, guardianships, and the adult care.
I just make one more comment on this. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt, and I wish Representative Whiteford was here to talk about this, because I think this is a space that she's really spent a lot of time in, but there's no doubt we're short on beds in the state. As we've moved away from institutionalizing these patients, we've also moved away from having the facilities to do it, and as we've had an uptick in some of this, I think that it's just the infrastructure is a little bit lacking, and that's maybe something that the state can participate in and help, but I think we have to be careful about trying to solve this problem at the state level compared to the local level, because much like you pointed out, there was a whole group of people that sort of came together to provide the wraparound services that a person in that situation needs, and I don't think that's something that the state can do very well on its own. I think it really requires the institutions that exist within local communities to come together to build a support structure that exists, because ultimately what ends up happening is someone does get institutionalized for a short period of time or something like that, and then as they come out, they don't have the network and the support structure. And that's where I think the local, sort of network makes so much of a difference, and that's going to be different, in all communities around the state. I think we're particularly lucky here in Ottawa County to have a lot of those services. That doesn't exist everywhere, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to incentivize that to happen.
So we should defund the state adult services.
That's.
Give the money locally.
I don't know that that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't know enough. I don't know enough about it. I think what I'm suggesting is to just solve it by throwing money at it at the state level, whether it's building out institutions or something else. I don't know that that's necessarily the way to do it. I think we have to empower local organizations to involve themselves in that. And maybe that is shifting some of those resources, but that would be premature for me to make that comment, because I don't know enough about it.
This is a great conversation, and I'm glad that everybody's engaged. Unfortunately, the clock is, we've already run past 3 minutes over, and so we're going to have to wrap things up here, but we will be back here March 21st. We will allow more time for our state legislators to weigh in on the various topics that you're all interested in. We're also going to hear from your favorite and lovable West Michigan political reporter, Rick Alvin, who's going to give us an update on redistricting. So that will be the topic here at 8 o'clock, March 21st. We look forward to seeing you all then. Please stick around. The legislators always do. If you have things you want to talk to them about, please feel free to. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with us today. Have a great week.